The people of Robertson County always claimed that land kept its secrets, that the soil folded memories into itself the way the river folds mud. But no one could explain why 12 of the richest families in the county erased their own surnames between 1847 and 1860. These were families synonymous with the history of the region, men who had held its courts, its banks, its elections, its land, yet they abandoned their names like burning buildings. Some fled to Missouri. Others vanished into Louisiana parishes. A few slipped quietly into Texas, carrying only what they could not bear to leave behind. What they fled was not a fever, nor a drought, nor war. They ran from a woman. Her name was Eliza Harwell. She had been born in 1824, with one eye the color of river water under winter light, and the other brown as turned earth. People whispered, then said such a child could see spirits, or glimpse the shape of things yet to happen. But superstition had nothing to do with what came. It was not what Eliza might have been able to see that destroyed those families. It was what she witnessed, remembered, and eventually dared to speak aloud. The Harwell plantation stood on 800 acres of fertile bottomland, a place where tobacco grew so thick and green it seemed almost unnatural. The main house, brick stitched with white mortar, sat like a crown above the rows of cabins. Behind it, the fields stretched toward the horizon, their neat lines a deception hiding the violence and toil required to keep them profitable. Colonel James Harwell ruled this land with a voice people described as respectable in public and feared in private. He managed his plantation with the cold competence of a man who believed the world's natural order placed him firmly at its top. In a cabin behind the main house, on a brisk morning in March 1824, a midwife named Ruth wiped the sweat from her brow as a newborn opened mismatched eyes. Ruth had delivered babies on 3 plantations over 70 years, had seen miracles and horrors, but never had she seen eyes like these. She swallowed whatever stories might arise from memory and forced her hands to steady. "Different eyes don't mean different fate," she murmured, though even she did not quite believe the words. The child's mother, Sarah, believed something else entirely. She saw the fear in Ruth's hands, the flicker of worry in her eyes, and understood that her daughter would live beneath a gaze sharper than that cast upon any other child in the quarters. But she held the infant close, whispered the name Eliza, and decided she would not allow superstition, nor the cruelty of those who controlled their lives to dictate her daughter's worth. For the first 6 years, Eliza lived like any child born into bondage, working small chores, learning caution, absorbing the silent languages of danger. The white children kept their distance, told mismatched eyes could spoil a person's luck. Within the quarters, the other children soon forgot her peculiarity, but Eliza remembered everything. She remembered what people said, how they said it, the tone and rhythm of conversations she'd had no right to overhear. Songs, stories, whispered prayers. She could recite them with unnatural precision, even years later. Her mother feared disability, the way one fears a candle. Flame in a house full of dry timber. But the world noticed by the summer of 1830. The county was cracking under a relentless drought. The river ran low, exposing bones of forgotten floods. Tempers thinned like worn rope. It was during this season that Eliza, now 6, began her first work inside the Harwell home, under the watch of Martha, the housekeeper who understood more about survival than any book could teach. Martha quickly recognized that the child's memory was a force with its own gravity, something powerful enough to draw danger from across the room. "You remember too well for this world," Martha whispered one night. "Too well for this place." But not even Martha could shield her from what she saw next. On a suffocating August evening, men gathered at the Harwell dining table, men who shaped the county's future the way a potter shapes clay. Judges, merchants, land speculators, politicians. The air shimmered with heat and bourbon. Eliza moved silently between them, pouring water, collecting plates, becoming invisible in the way enslaved children were expected to be. Yet she heard everything. She heard a land speculator brag about forging papers that robbed a widow of her home. She heard a judge justify ripping 3 children from a freed father, because acknowledging their claim would disrupt the system. She heard a plan spoken casually, as if discussing the weather to ruin a free woman named Grace Thornhill, whose only crime was owning land those men coveted. Her protection is paper-thin, one of them said. A free woman of color, no husband, no allies, no power, a matter of time. 3 months later, Grace's farmhouse burned in a fire so fierce neighbors claimed they'd never seen timber burn so fast. She died inside. Her land was seized weeks later. Eliza remembered every word spoken that August night. Memory becomes a burden only when the truth demands to be carried. At 6 years old, she carried more truth than any child ever should. Through the 1830s, she grew into a young woman whose intelligence could not be disguised, no matter how carefully she tried to dull the edge of it. She became a quiet fixture in the rooms where men schemed. She learned their rhythms, their alliances, the hidden strings that tied the county's wealthiest families into a single, monstrous machine. They called themselves nothing official, but in secret they behaved like an order 12 men with 12 spheres of influence, weaving courts, banks, land offices, warehouses, and politics into a single net that no farmer, freedman, widow, or small landowner could escape. They spoke freely in her presence because they believed her incapable of understanding. They believed her questions too small, her life too insignificant to intersect with their own. They did not know she was collecting them one by one, storing every word. By 1843, the old colonel was dying and his son, James Jr., had returned from Nashville, a man eager for power, spoiled by education, carrying his father's ambition, but none of his restraint. In his arrogance, he allowed Eliza to listen even more closely. He treated her memory as a tool. He tested it. He relied on it. And in doing so, he revealed every crack in the alliance his father had held together for 2 decades. The men began to distrust one another. The machine groaned. Then James Jr., reckless and hungry, made the mistake that shattered the spell they'd cast over the county. Desperate for money after a disastrous investment, he decided to sell Elisal, the one witness alive who held 2 decades of their secrets. He arranged for her to be sent south, where her memory would vanish into the darkness of Louisiana. Plantations. He gave himself 8 months to complete the sale. Eliza gave herself 8 months to escape. She taught herself to write in ash and dirt. She drafted a letter with trembling fingers, and when a circuit preacher stayed at the plantation one known in Nashville for condemning corruption, she left her letter on his pillow. At dawn, when he met her beneath the oak at the edge of the property, she recited his entire sermon word for word. The man stepped back, as if struck. "You remember all of it," he whispered. "I remember everything," she said, "and I will be sold in 8 weeks, unless someone helps me speak it." What followed became legend in Nashville's legal circles. Committees raised money, lawyers formed strategies, allies coordinated quietly to purchase her freedom in a single swift action. James Jr., blind to what he was losing, accepted a higher price from a sympathetic religious society and signed away what he believed to be no more than a curiosity. By the time he realized the truth, Eliza was gone. Her testimony, beginning in late 1845, tore through Tennessee like a storm. Courtrooms filled. Newspapers printed every word. Families who had been robbed stepped forward with courage they had not dared to muster before. The 12 pillars of Robertson County cracked, then collapsed under the weight of the truth she carried. Land speculators fled. Judges resigned in disgrace. Merchants closed their doors. Bankers vanished into other states. By 1847, the Springfield Association was ashes scattered across 4 states, and in the years that followed, Their descendants changed their names because the old ones tasted like ruin on their tongues. Eliza never returned to Robertson County. Some secrets belonged to the land, and she had no desire to touch that soil again. She lived quietly in Nashville, married, had children, worked honest labor. Sometimes the court summoned a woman with mismatched eyes to testify about matters others had forgotten. She came, she remembered. She left. She died in 1873, buried in the section of the cemetery where names washed away with weather and time. No marker stands for her. No monument honors the voice that toppled an empire of corruption. But stories persist where stone cannot dot. Some say the courthouse fire of 1891 was no accident. Certain families preferred ashes to documentation. Others insist the scandal was exaggerated. A tale fed by abolitionists eager for proof of the slaveholding South's corruption. But anyone who studies the record sees the truth in the pattern. 12 families fell at once. Through testimony so precise it could not be dismissed, that woman they believed beneath their notice became the one voice they could not silence. In the end, it was not magic, nor a curse, nor the strange shine of mismatched eyes. It was memory. It was a young woman forced to witness the darkest machinery of power, and finally given the means to expose it. Sometimes justice does not need armies. Sometimes it needs only a mind that forgets nothing in the moment to speak.